students ask us why Cambridge and not Oxford. I was wondering what you had.
I think for me, it comes down to
Hello, and welcome to Cambridge from the Inside. I'm Siam, and I'm the Outreach Communications Officer of Trinity Hall. And
I'm still Marcus Tomlin, and I'm still the Director of Admissions at Trinity Hall.
Nice. So we've got another podcast for you. Today we're doing our frequently asked questions on admissions, our part 3 of this series. Fingers crossed we should be able to get through all of the questions today. So hopefully you've been staying in tuned with our previous parts. If you're wanting to know about the frequently asked questions that we receive in the admissions team at Cambridge, at Trinity Hall, we've gone through a lot of questions already, so do check out those episodes. So first question I've got here for you today, Marcus, is what is a deferred entry?
Yeah, so it's one of the options that's available for people when they apply to Cambridge. Quite simply, when you apply to Cambridge, you can either apply for the most immediate year when you could start as a student, or you can choose to apply for the year following that. So your place is deferred by a year. That's simply what it means in practice. And it's normally only quite a small percentage of people who apply who choose to apply for deferred entry. The majority tend to apply for, the point of entry that's closest to when they apply. So they don't really want to take a gap year if that's another way of looking at it. There's no great advantage or disadvantage to doing that. If someone knows that they do want to take a gap year for whatever reason, then it's an option available to them to apply for deferred entry, which would then give them that year to do something else before starting their studies. But there is also the option that's available to them of not applying for deferred entry, taking a gap year and applying during the gap year. And then they would be applying after getting their school exam results. And there may be reasons why that's a good thing to do, because it means that if we're sufficiently impressed by them, when we make them an offer, it won't be a conditional offer. They won't have to get any more school exam results. It would just be an unconditional offer. So if they chose to accept it, they would certainly start the course. So that's in essence what a deferred entry is.
And just to make it clear, you can apply for deferred entry to any university. It's not like a Cambridge specific thing. And you should double check this, but I think you might be able to apply for some courses at some universities deferred entry, and then the others not a deferred entry. That I assume you can do that through UCAS. So let's say I'm applying to Birmingham, and that application specifically is deferred entry, and my Cambridge application is not a deferred entry. I'm going straight into the course. You should be able to do that, but I would double check. Deferred entries, I think there's a lot to be said about if different pathways a student can go down if they choose not to apply immediately, and I think there's also a lot of reasons why a student wouldn't apply immediately. So I think normally a student, if I'm right, would apply for deferred entry because they want to take a gap year. That is effectively applying, saying that you don't want to go to university the immediate September coming after year 13, but the September the following year. So if you're in that position, great. I mean, I personally think it's a great position to be in. That you want to take a gap year and you also want to apply to university. I would say one thing that's really good about applying for deferred entry, if you want to do that, is you apply for deferred entry. Say if you weren't to get in, you could still take your gap year, and assuming your A-level grades, once you get them in the summer, meet the entry requirements, then you could make a reapplication, and that could be and your reapplication wouldn't be a deferred entry but just a direct entry, and if that was to be successful, you will end up starting at the same time that you originally planned. So I personally think that's a really smart way to go about it. If you know in the start of year 13 that you definitely want to take a gap year, you can kind of go down the route of deferred entry, see if it works, see if you get in. If you don't, reapply, and you end up starting at the same spot. I wouldn't recommend that for everyone who wants to apply to university after getting the A-level grades, because you might want to apply after receiving your grades, because you might feel like doing the application in year 13 alongside doing your A-levels is just too much. You have to be quite organized to do a direct entry or a deferred entry in year 13, because you're balancing your A-level grades. So if you feel like you do want to take a gap year, but alongside enjoying the year off from education, the reasons that you want to take the gap year is because you just feel quite overwhelmed with studying and the idea of university, then I think it's fair for that student to not feel like they should do a deferred entry, because it's just adding more stress. If you're in that kind of position, leave the university application for the year after, just focus on getting the grades, because once you get the grades, you're in a very powerful position.
Exactly. And I think these are things that I'd encourage any potential applicant who's uncertain about whether to do one of these things or the other, maybe to have a chat with the relevant person at the school who's there to give advice, and there's usually someone whose job it is to sort of help students who are making applications to universities, and see what they say. The school is usually best placed to offer advice because they know their students pretty well, and they know whether it would be a good thing for student X and maybe not a good thing for student Y. So I think make full use of all the support and advice that's available at the schools, really.
And do feel free to email either the Central University or us at Trinity Hall, or any colleges at Cambridge, the admissions team, as these situations might be new for yourselves, but we've seen them year after year, so we're in a position where we can provide some really helpful advice for these seemingly unique situations. But as I've said, we've encountered them.
It's perfectly normal. We see it every year.
One question I did have about deferred entries is, so I've always had the idea that, so if I apply directly, let's say I'm applying for natural sciences, and I apply directly, and there's 7 other people that apply. So out of it's out of us 8, my application is going to be compared to the other 7, and then all of the others in the other colleges in the pools database, a database that all of the colleges have access to. So I'm going to be compared to those applicants who've applied to Trinity Hall and the applicants in the university. If I apply deferred, I assume I'm going to be compared to what we would imagine the pool of talent would normally be in a given year, because we obviously there aren't that many deferred entries. It's unlikely there to be another natural sciences deferred applicant to this college, maybe across the university. So does that make it, does my application have to be very strong for the college to say, even though we don't know what the pool of talent is, we really want him? Do you see what I'm...
Yeah, I do. And it's a good question to ask. And it is a question that, we're asked a fair bit on open days and stuff like that, from people who are considering making a deferred entry application. I think the honest answer is the people who apply for deferred entry have to be sufficiently convincing that we're happy to assign one of the places for the following year in advance, to them. So we will obviously compare them to the gathered field that we have in the year when we're assessing their application. But yeah, we are also thinking about the kind of standard that we normally see, and we're trying to anticipate the kind of standard that we're likely to see the following year when, at the point when we make that decision, we haven't seen next year's gathered field yet. But yeah, if we're sufficiently reassured that, this is an applicant who would be competitive, frankly, in kind of any year, then we're really happy to make an offer to someone who wants deferred entry. But if someone applies and, if there are aspects of the application we're not convinced about, or then of course we're less likely to make an offer for deferred entry, simply because we might say, well, we're highly likely to see people in next year's gathered field who are just generally more convincing. But as you said, if someone is in that situation, if they apply for deferred entry and are unsuccessful, but then go on to do really well in their school exams and everything, they can reapply during their gap year, and then of course we can consider them in relation to that year's gathered field. And if they impress us, then of course we can make an offer at that point. So I think that's a kind of honest response to that. We have to be sufficiently convinced that in kind of any year we would be happy to make an offer to that person. But then we're kind of doing that anyway, whenever we make offers. I wouldn't say it's much more difficult to get an offer if you apply for deferred entry. I think it's pretty difficult, whether you're applying for immediate entry or deferred entry. So we're asking ourselves the same sort of questions about the applicants and trying to convince ourselves that we're making good decisions when we make the offers.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and it's really difficult to get in if you don't apply.
Right. Virtually impossible. If you don't apply at all.
So yeah, it's amazing how many people you meet had no intention of coming, but I don't know, they just ended up applying because their friends or teachers were like, oh yeah, you should just throw in that, and then throw in an application, and then all of a sudden they get an offer. And have a great time. I mean, so the next question that we had was in regards to deferred entries and unsuccessful applications. Say if a student was to be unsuccessful and they wanted to make a reapplication, would you recommend that they were to apply to a different college compared to the one they applied first time around? Yeah,
the kind of standard advice is to apply to a different college, and that's simply so that the application can be assessed with kind of like new eyes by a different sort of admissions team. If you reapply to exactly the same college, the chances are at least one of us will remember the application, and that in itself isn't a problem. I mean, that's not going to be a deal breaker from the start. But if we chose not to make an offer because there were some things we weren't sufficiently convinced by, it's really hard for us to kind of just forget all of that and to look at the application with like new eyes and just not have any of that baggage left over from, say, the previous year. Whereas if someone reapplies and they apply to a different college, that college will be assessing the application for the first time, so you get a completely kind of new start. And it's just, I think, in the best interest of the applicant to do that. It just avoids a situation where you're being reassessed by exactly the same people. So there's no regulation forbidding people from applying to the same college. If someone really, really wants to, technically they can. But our standard advice is normally that that's not really in the best interest of the applicant. So we really would encourage people not to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but I mean, in most aspects of life, you want to give yourself a clean slate when you're going for a second chance. I think so. I didn't get didn't get an offer the first time round and reapplied, and I chose a different college the second time round, and I'm unsure of if the people interviewing me even knew that I had applied a first time round.
Usually they don't. Yeah. Usually they don't have that information.
And it was just so nice in the whole process that it really felt like not only a second chance, a second application, but also an experience that was entirely independent to the first time round. Because I think you don't want to be in a position where you apply to the same college, you are unsuccessful, and you don't want to. It's hard to find closure if you're thinking, well, was I unsuccessful because my application wasn't strong enough, or was it because they didn't think my application was strong enough the first time round, and they struggled to shake that off. If you apply for a different college and you're unsuccessful, then you have some closure that in 2 attempts, these 2 colleges, independent of each other, came to these conclusions. And I think that's a much. Most people would rather be in that position than the prior. Yeah,
exactly. It's just easier for everyone, I think.
Yeah, and it'd be tough to have an interview by someone who's rejected you a year before that.
And it's not fun for the interviewers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation. So I think it's just better if it's avoided,
Yeah. I mean, my second application, I felt so invigorated and positive and energetic. And if I'd known it was the same.
Hi, it's me again. How you doing?
I don't know if I'd have had the fortitude to, or just like the energy, the excitement. If I knew it was the same old suspects. Oh, yeah. So on the theme of deferred entries, reapplications, we get a lot of questions about gap years, which will probably warrant its own podcast episodes. But would you say gap years are good or bad?
Gap years are not normally a problem at all. We like to see some evidence that the person applying is planning to do at least something related to their academic subject during the gap year. I mean, again, remember we've just read a whole load of personal statements where people are saying, I'm absolutely obsessed about this subject. I've been obsessed with this subject, since I was 4 years old and blah, blah, blah. Great. And then if it looks like they just want to have a year where they kind of lie on a beach and do nothing at all, let alone any academic stuff, quite rightly, I think, we think, oh, this is weird, because you just told me you're obsessed with, economics or philosophy or whatever, and you're planning to have a year where you have nothing to do with it. So talk to me about the nature of this obsession. It seems a little bit like low-level obsession, really. So we like to see some evidence that, there's going to be some attempt to sort of continue with or sort of deepen, the person's understanding of particular topics and things. And for some colleges, mathematics is a subject where they sometimes feel that gap years can be a little bit problematical, just because mathematical skills tend to get rusty really quickly, just because of the specificity and precision of it. So if you forget a few little details, suddenly it becomes very difficult to manipulate equations of certain kinds. You just can't remember how to do it. And so some colleges like to see evidence of a continuation of some sort of mathematical study. I mean, one way of handling that, if someone does apply for maths, is if they get their, if they're successful and they get an offer, and part of that offer is to take STEP, then they could take STEP during the gap year, basically, to keep the mathematical skills, fully sharp during the gap year.
So just to clarify on that, when you say take STEP, do you mean prepare, like as in do practice papers? Right.
Well, could do that, or could actually, you can take it in advance. Yeah, you can take it in advance. Yeah. So some people apply to us and they've already met the kind of STEP part of the qualification, which can take the pressure off the application a little bit. So that I'm not saying they should do that. I'm just saying that's an option, and every year a small number of people do that. It's just worth considering.
Yeah, and it's worth definitely, if you are thinking of doing that, taking STEP early, just making sure you know when like the entry deadlines are for those exams.
Exactly,
because you don't want to.
That's right.
Miss the boat.
And all of that is on the web pages and everything. Yeah. It's all in the public domain, so it's easy to find that out.
Exactly.
But yeah, the kind of high level message is, gap years aren't usually a problem at all, and it can often be beneficial. It depends what people do during it, but often the students who come to us having taken a gap year, they're a little bit more mature. So if they've done some traveling or something, as people often do, they tend to be a little bit more independent than they would have been if they just applied straight from school. And these are all things that can make studying as an undergraduate a little bit easier. If you're a bit more mature, a bit more independent, you're kind of a bit more at ease making the transition from school to university. But then again, for other people, the right thing to do is not to take a gap year and just to continue straight on. We all work in different ways. We all are at different kind of points in our development when we apply to university. So again, I think be advised by teachers and friends and family people who know you well, and just try to make a good decision about whether that's the right option for you or not. From our point of view, it's not a problem.
Nice. Yeah, I think you want to make, if you do take a gap year, you want to make sure that not only showing in your personal statement what you've been doing academically, but also doing that.
Yeah.
Like my friend, he studied maths, took a gap year. And with maths, it can go either two ways. And there's a very valid worry that a gap year for a maths student, they'll become very rusty. But that's not the case if they do a lot of maths.
Yeah, absolutely. They can get very sharp.
And they can get very sharp, exactly.
During the gap year, yeah.
Which was exactly like what he didn't do an overwhelming amount, but he enjoyed it. He did a lot of STEP papers, which helped for his interview. And then in his first year, he went into it with quite a bit of confidence.
Yep.
And myself similarly, because I'd finished my chemistry at A-level and was quite confident on the content, I'd gone into more first year university stuff, which then really helped me in my first year, helped me in my interview, just having a bit of confidence in knowing that I'd like already covered this material. But it is really important for a student to work out what would be best for them. I think if you're there thinking, I'd really like a gap year, and like I have like a kind of plan. Financially, it's feasible. Whereas like for majority of people, they'd be able to stay at home and like roof over your head and food is like just that is can be catered for. If you're in that kind of position, I think and you have a plan. I think then it can work out really well. When it's unplanned, you don't want to be. It's tough when you see someone, they were on a gap year, they didn't really have much of a plan of what they wanted to do, and 8 months have gone and nothing's really happened. That can be good if the student really needed a break. That then no plan needed, like, for sure. Recuperate. But I think if you're in a position where you feel like you want to take a gap year, you have a plan, you have lists, like the things that you want to do, you know how to use the time, but people around you are saying, oh, but no one does this, you know, like no one, like, it's quite a rogue idea. I think I would trust your intuition on that, because there's a lot of good things to come if it is well planned.
Exactly. And I think without some kind of plan, a gap year, you can often kind of drift a bit and lose momentum a bit and end up feeling less prepared for university than you were when you just finished at school. And obviously that's undesirable. You know, if you take a gap year, you should feel like, you know, hopefully really well prepared and looking forward to it, you know, being really keen to start at university.
So our next question is, is the foundation year something that universities offer as well as Cambridge? I was wondering if you could, first of all, just explain to us, like, what a foundation year is.
Yeah, as you say, so quite a few universities, probably these days, most universities offer a foundation year of some kind. And it's really a chance for students who are interested in going to university, but perhaps feel that they're not at the level they need to be to go straight into an undergraduate course. It's an opportunity for them to acquire some of the skills that they'd need to make a really convincing application for the undergraduate course at a university. So most foundation years normally last just for 1 year, as the name suggests. And they're normally based at the university that's offering the course. So it gives people a chance to experience student life to some extent in a way that's very similar to how you'd experience it as an undergraduate. It often has a particular kind of syllabus that's been designed to help students develop the kind of skills that they really need. And then as they get towards the end of that foundation year course or program, they're normally given really good advice about making an application for an undergraduate course, either at the university that offers the foundation year course or program, or at another university. So it doesn't trap you into staying at that university. You can apply elsewhere. And that's pretty much how the foundation year here at Cambridge works. The Cambridge foundation year is only available for subjects in the areas, you know, arts, humanities, and social sciences. So if you're really interested in the sciences like maths and natural sciences, we don't have a foundation year for those students yet. I think that the plan is to try and expand it so that the foundation year does cover sciences as well eventually. But at the moment, it's just arts, humanities, and social sciences. The sort of academic standard that's required is lower than the academic standard that's required to start an undergraduate course, because, as I said, the foundation years are normally designed to try and help people develop those skills so that they become, you know, more competitive as a result of taking the foundation year. So the entry requirement for the Cambridge course, it's done by UCAS tariff points. So I think off the top of my head, I think it's 120 at the moment. So that's what we expect people to get in terms of UCAS points. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of core of it, really. That's the sort of purpose of it. And as with other foundation year programs at other universities, here at Cambridge, there are certain eligibility criteria. There's quite a long list of them, so I'm not going to try and sort of repeat them all from memory because I'll definitely get it wrong, but it's all absolutely explicit on the web pages about the foundation year. But it's basically things like, if someone's applying and their care experience, so they've been in care, then that's one of the things that can make them eligible for the foundation year program. But there are lots of other things as well, including things like if you're on free school meals, or if your household income is below a certain threshold. There's a whole set of these things. And if you have either one of these things or a combination of these things, then that can make you eligible to be considered for the foundation year program. So that, in essence, is what it is.
Nice. And I think one of the key things that to take away about the foundation year is that the entry requirements tend to be a lot lower than what the entry requirements would be to apply for directly the undergraduate course. So I think for one of my friends, he was a very bright individual, very good GCSEs, for whatever reason, did not perform well in A levels. Other circumstances in his life had really took the main focus of his attention at that time. But he still wants to go to university. Very keen on maths, and he chose to do a maths and climate change course. I think that was the title, in University of Liverpool. That did the foundation year, did really well, and then ended up graduating with a first in the undergrad course, and now is like a very, very sought after individual. And it's amazing how he was at one stage, he was in a position where with his A-level grades really struggled to know what doors were available, and then whereas with the foundation year having lower entry requirements, he was able to really turn around his academic career.
And that's exactly why it exists for people in that situation. It enables them to make the transition from school to university in a way that perhaps might not have been possible if they tried to go straight to university. And it's often due to circumstances beyond their control. I mean, if someone's been in care, while they've been taking their GCSEs and their A-levels, that may, depending upon the personal circumstances, have come with all sorts of complexities. It could have involved them having to relocate multiple times and all the kind of instability that comes with that. So it's just obvious that they might just need a year to kind of really get centered, get focused, and really demonstrate their ability. And then they're able to make a really competitive application for an undergraduate course. So that's the whole kind of rationale behind these foundation year programs. So it's potentially like a really, really beneficial thing.
Nice, yeah. So slightly moving away from foundation years, gap years, deferred entries, etc. A lot of students ask, they have this idea that Cambridge is a very expensive place to live, an expensive university to attend to. If I'm a student and I think, and I say something like, I'm worried about covering my living costs with regards to going to university or going to Cambridge specifically, what would you say to that student?
Yeah, well, it certainly is one of the sort of prevailing myths about Cambridge, that it's a really, really, really expensive university to be a student at. And it's one of the myths that I guess annoys those of us who kind of work here quite a lot, just because the opposite's true, really. Cambridge is actually not a particularly expensive university to be a student at. In fact, it's considerably cheaper than a large number of other UK universities, probably the majority of UK universities. And that's for various reasons. So there are no travel costs once you've actually arrived at Cambridge for the start of term. I mean, I appreciate people come from around the world and around the country. So yeah, there's a bit of travel involved in sort of getting here. But once you're at Cambridge for the start of term, unless you choose to, go down to London or something, a few times during the term, there are just no travel costs. You just walk everywhere you need to get to, or if you've got a bike, you can use a bike. But it's not possible to get a train across the centre of Cambridge, so you don't have to sit on a train for 45 minutes just to get to your lectures. It just doesn't exist like that. It's a smaller place and everything's easily accessible. So that's one of the things that makes it a lot cheaper than some other universities. Another thing is that when the students are here, they're normally based in one of the colleges, and we're here in one of the rooms in Trinity Hall. The colleges are able to control the room rent. So the colleges can make sure that the rooms aren't prohibitively expensive. Whereas if someone were to go to a university where for the bulk of the course they're having to sort of, rent a room in the private sector through a landlord, that often turns out to be a more expensive option. So I would say in general, the accommodation costs in Cambridge are considerably cheaper. And then also there's a lot of financial support that's available at Cambridge. That's both at the university level and at the college level. So there's a Cambridge bursary that's available to people who's it's how much money you receive from that is determined by household income, and it's a sort of sliding scale. So the people with lower household incomes receive more financial support. And that's a university level bursary that doesn't need to be paid back. You just get that money and you can use it for whatever you want to use it for. But then also at the college level, it's true of all the colleges, and certainly here at Trinity Hall, we have hardship resources basically. So if we've got any students and they're struggling to pay for their accommodation, especially if, say, their family situation has changed, maybe a parent has been made redundant unexpectedly, something like that. I mean, we're well aware we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, so things are expensive generally at the moment. We've got hardship resources that exist purely and able to help students cope. And the kind of high level mantra, I guess, for the university as a whole is that, if we think someone has the academic ability and potential to study here and to flourish here as a student, then they shouldn't be prevented from coming here for financial reasons. And we'll try to do whatever we can to make sure that that's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, I really think Cambridge has the ethos that a student shouldn't feel like they can't study here because they can't financially afford it. That's definitely true for the home students in international fees. There's not as much international financial support to cover the tuition fees, but if you're a home student and you're getting a student loan through the government, then your tuition fees are covered through the student loan.
And often for international students, there are sources of funding from their countries that help them fund study abroad. So again, it's often for those students to just make sure they've considered all of those options, and there are usually ways of getting some kind of funding to support their studies here.
Nice. Yeah, and I think one of the benefits about Cambridge and the collegial system and is that if you were like the college community, the staff, the relationship between like the staff and the students, the pastoral care, it's like a second community, a second family away from a home, in that, if you were to undergo some sudden financial hardship or hardship of any kind, there's a real sense of you would be looked after. There'll be people who'd want to know that this is happening and who'd want to find a solution. Right, comparing that to if it was just the university and there was no colleges, you might feel like you're quite distant to the person who you're emailing and in conversation with, whereas being a part of the college, you actually see the individuals face to face, which I think makes a big difference.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, this is something I'm sure we can do a future podcast on, but for all the students who are at Cambridge, there's a pretty extensive support network of people who are there primarily to look after their well-being, whether that's personal and physical or financial. So we can maybe in the future talk a bit more about who some of the key players are in that really quite elaborate support network. And again, it's a sort of support network that you don't necessarily get at every university in the country, but you certainly get it here. And it's something that may reassure some people who are considering applying, but they're worried about these things. If they know a little bit more about the kind of support we offer, that's likely, hopefully that's likely to reassure them a little bit and make them think, okay, I could be at Cambridge and make it work in a way that doesn't put me under huge stress all the time.
No, yeah, of course, yeah. I think if anything, like there's so much systems in place that students are really given the best opportunity to thrive. We get this question a lot from students. They've overheard that you can't get a job whilst you're studying at Cambridge. A job in that, if I'm a student and I was to also work at a restaurant or at a cafe, the college would not want me to do that. Is that the case?
Yeah, it is the case at Cambridge. It's simply because the terms here are quite short. So we just have 3 8-week terms. And really the bulk of the sort of teaching and learning takes place in the first 2 of them. So in total, that's just a 16-week period in 2 separate chunks, where the bulk of, the lectures happen and the supervisions happen and all of that stuff. And then in the 3rd term, there's sort of 4 weeks when some revision happens. And then there's 4 weeks when students take exams. So it's a really sort of compressed amount of time that students have to sort of learn the things they need to learn. And it would just basically be impossible to have, well, certainly be impossible to have a full-time job and do that. And in most cases, it would just be impossible to have a part-time job and do that. The students here are, of course, able to get jobs during the vacation periods. So, when they go home or whatever, they're absolutely free to get some sort of employment then, and the vast majority do, because it gives them a little bit of money to help with various costs during the following term. So that's fine. It's just during term itself. And so, yeah, the students aren't allowed to have kind of, paid employment really in a significant way. There are a few ways in which they can earn a little bit of money while they're students during term, though. So this varies a little bit from college to college, but there are often some opportunities within the college itself just to make a little bit of money. Often it's things like helping out behind the bar or something like that, or in some colleges maybe helping out in the library. But that would only ever be for really quite short shifts, like maybe an hour or a couple of hours. It's not going to be like half a day or something. So that's a slight sort of slight deviation from the kind of hard line. And I think these days, lots of people do stuff for fun as hobbies that can bring them in a little bit of money as well. I'm thinking of, people who sort of, create music, in their room, like their bedroom at home, but they could easily do that in their bedroom here at Cambridge. And then, maybe put it online and maybe that brings in a little bit of money from hits that they get from whichever online platform. We tend not to view that, I guess, as like a job. There isn't an employer as such. There isn't a contract. You're not expected to be in a particular place at a particular time from like 9 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's more just like a sort of hobby stroke side hustle thing. So I think there are fewer constraints around that. And if we found that a student was doing something like that to such an extent that it was undermining their academic work, then that's where there might be a few conversations involving the kind of support team that I mentioned, because we wouldn't want the student to really underperform in their university exams because they're giving 80% of their time to sort of writing music online or whatever they're doing. There's a whole load of things they could be doing. So a lot of it comes down to just being sensible and making good decisions and getting the balance right between the things that are focused on the academic work, which is the main reason why the students are here, and the other stuff that they do is sort of extracurriculars and stuff they do for fun and hobbies. It's just for all students, it's just a question of making sure that balance is right.
Yeah, I mean, I think if students get, I don't know, I think our prospective students don't quite understand. They might think like, if I can't get a job, but what if I need the money? Like, this doesn't add up. Like, what would I do in that situation? I think the idea is that, I think students, prospective applicants don't realise how much support Cambridge are willing to offer. Like if you're like no college, no tutor, no academic wants a Cambridge student to feel like they need to get a part-time job in order to keep things afloat. Like if you're in that position, the thing to do would be to communicate that with your tutor or like someone in the college that you feel comfortable talking to about that financially you're struggling to make ends meet, and a solution will be found to that one way or another that won't require you to get a job.
Exactly. We'd like it to be the case, and it usually is the case, that students here just don't need to have a part-time job or a full-time job during term, because we give them the financial support they need to ensure that that's something that just isn't necessary.
And I also think it's when I was a student, I think the idea of also working for an employer, like in a hospitality job, the pressures are quite intense. Like from your manager, like you've got to be there on time. If you're a few minutes late, you're going to get a telling off. It's a real extra responsibility added on to an already intense schedule with your academic responsibilities and any societies you're a part of. I think most people, they have their academic, like studying parts of their lives, and they have their downtime, societies, meeting friends, hobbies, etc. And I think in the 8-week terms, that balance works really well.
Exactly.
And if you happen to make money from like your hobbies, brilliant. Like I know friends who were in bands, and they were able to get ball tickets without having to pay because they were performing. I know vloggers who enjoy vlogging, and their like YouTube pops off. Musicians, etc. Who it's just and that's very different to getting like being under employment.
Exactly.
So lastly, we get this question a lot. Maybe I for sure do when students find out that I went to Oxford. Students ask us why Cambridge and not Oxford. I was wondering what you had.
I think for me it comes down to the courses. So I think if a given student is interested in a particular subject or a little cluster of subjects, they should always look really closely and carefully at the courses that the different universities offer, not just Oxford and Cambridge, but other Russell Group universities or other universities. And the thing to do is try and work out whether that's the best course for you. And if, having done that, you decide that the best course is at Cambridge, then you should apply to Cambridge, because that's the course you should be doing. And if, having done that, you decide that the best course is at Oxford, then you should apply to Oxford, because that's the best course for you. I think that really is the best way of kind of thinking about it, really, and drill down into it in enough detail, because Oxford and Cambridge and many other universities offer courses that have the same kind of name. It might be called like English literature or something like that. But when you actually look at the course, it's structured in very different ways. It incorporates different things. So just to take that example, the kind of English literature and language course at Oxford includes the Anglo-Saxon period. So you get to read works of literature in Old English or in Anglo-Saxon, if you like. That's not an obligatory part of the Cambridge course. It starts a bit later than that. It starts during the medieval period, so from about sort of 1300, not pre that. So if you know that you're applying for English and you really want to spend a bit of time reading Anglo-Saxon literature, you should definitely apply for the Oxford course, because that's a fundamental part of it. You can study those things here at Cambridge, but it's kind of an optional thing that you get to via a different way. So I think looking at those sorts of differences between the courses and basing the decision on that is better than trying to work out whether in some abstract sense, Cambridge is better than Oxford or not. I mean, what does that mean? Like, what are we talking about? Like air quality or something? I don't know what it means.
Yeah, and those kind of, so I think first and foremost, we should explain that the reason why this question is quite important is because in one given application year, you can only apply to one or the other.
Yep.
So you do have to make a decision.
Yep.
I know people who've applied for one, like Cambridge in the first year, not get in, and then the second year apply to Oxford. But so you could apply to both in that sense, but in
any one given year, you can only apply to one or the other.
Exactly. So a decision has to be made. And to add on what you were saying, I think if you're trying to compare them in an abstract sense or prestige or which one is just like better, I don't think those are the best reasons to be applying for either universities anyways. No. Like when I was a student, and students who wanted to come to Oxford for the prestige, that the prestige doesn't last that long. and the course is 3 or 4 years, 30 hours of work a week. And they've kind of presumed, or they've assessed you, and they've kind of like they've trusted that you are curious about the subject and enjoy it. When I see a student who've just gone for the prestigious institution, aren't really that driven about the course, it's a tough 3 years. And you don't want to be in that position.
Whereas if you're studying a course that is a good fit for you, it's the right course, the 3 years is fun.
Oh, yeah, exactly, yeah.
3 years, 4 years, however long the course lasts, it's a lot of fun. So I just think, almost forget all the kind of higher level, which is better in some abstract sense. Look at the things you're interested in, look at those courses and make a really pragmatic, sensible decision based on course content.
And on top of that, I think if you can, whether it's through online or in person, definitely do check out both cities, because if there's not too much, I think course is definitely the most important, and you want to choose the course that fits you the best way possible. If the courses you're fairly indifferent to both institutions, choosing the city and that you could see yourself living in more so than the other is definitely something that I'd encourage students to do, because I think university is you're going to be living there for 3 or 4 years, and there's benefits to both cities, and you can only really make your own judgment.
It's a personal thing. I mean, there isn't some abstract universal law that says everyone will be happy in this place or that. It comes down to what you're used to, what you prefer, what kind of lifestyle you want to have as a student. So that's a very, very subjective thing.
And they're both academically and in the cities, phenomenal institutions and phenomenal cities to live in. It's kind of so do you prefer rubies or sapphires? It's well, they're both, first and foremost, they're both great. I wouldn't mind one or the other. And it is a personal choice. I think because I obviously studied at Oxford and been living in Cambridge for a year now. One thing that I've noticed is that there are a lot of myths about the culture of both universities and the courses and the types of people, and and then obviously my job is to understand the courses that Cambridge offers, the course content, the structure, what kind of students would what they offer for the students. And I tend to find that what actually is happening in the university and what we offer the students is not aligning with the myths of what Cambridge is for and what Cambridge doesn't provide. Similarly with what Oxford is for and what it doesn't provide. To give some examples, there's a slight myth that Cambridge is the place to go for sciences. It is true that the natural science course is it's a very good course, and the maths course is very good, but I studied chemistry at Oxford, and I knew a lot of STEM people studying in sciences. The courses at Oxford were incredibly well thought out as well. The maths course at Oxford is in course content very, very similar to the Cambridge one. If I'm not going, no two things are identical to each other, but they're very similar. So that doesn't, on one side you're hearing if you want to do maths you should go to Cambridge, but then the courses that they offer and how the teaching happens, the amount of work you get per week are almost identical. Those two don't align. To give another example, I think I've heard students say, if you want to become a politician or if you want to study politics, you want to go to Oxford. It is true that the Oxford Union at least looks like it has a bigger reach than the Cambridge Union, at least from its YouTube views. Other than that, and maybe the amount of Tory politicians that have come out of the Oxford Union, but I've done webinars with HSPS academics, the main politics course that you can study at Cambridge, and the amount of variety of different politics options there are, the amount of depth that each of the modules goes to, and I guess to say that there aren't students who are interested in politics in Cambridge when the intake is a huge amount for HSPS and the history and politics course just is not true, is not reflective of the student body. Not to go too much into HSPS, but they have a lot of very interesting 20th century politics as well that some of the courses at Oxford lack. So you could even argue that if you really wanted to cutting edge politics, there's advantages to the HSPS course over the PPE course in Oxford. So as you said, you want to work out which course is right for you, really looking into the differences between the courses, looking at, if you have the opportunity, going to both of the cities, working out which one is that you can see yourself living in for 3-4 years, and I think it's important to mention, in case the viewers don't know, the reason why we're talking about this is that in a given year you do have to apply to one or the other universities. You can't apply to both. Was there, do you think was there anything that you think I missed with?
No, I'd agree with all of that, and there are so many myths that circulate around both Oxford and Cambridge, and I would just encourage people not to believe them. Basically, maybe there was a time in the distant past when the one university or the other did things in a certain kind of way, but so much has changed in the past sort of 20 or 30 years that I think if someone believes something about Cambridge or Oxford just because they've heard other people sort of talking about it in a sort of almost gossipy way, Cambridge is the place for sciences and Oxford is useless for sciences, it's just not true. So any knowledge that you think you have about the universities that has come to you that way, mistrust it. And do a bit of research, do a bit of digging, come and talk to us, and come and go and talk to our colleagues at Oxford, and actually find out what the truth is, in the 21st century about these universities, not maybe what the truth was in the 1930s or the 1940s, because that's the best way to make sure you apply from a position of knowledge and kind of information, rather than just sort of myth and sort of vague gossip about the two universities. So I think that's the thing I'd suggest. I think
with myths and gossip, myths become true if you become more true if you believe in them. So some students might say about this is the kind of culture for Oxford, this is the kind of culture for Cambridge, but you've got to take into account what came first, their observation, or did they come into it thinking this? And I guess I've genuinely come into Cambridge with open eyes and just consistently noticed more similarities between the institutions in terms of the courses and the culture amongst the students than the myths suggest.
You'll be telling me unicorns don't exist next.
I was trying to work out whether you said unicorns did exist or did. This is, when Marcus is so sarcastic, you have to. There's no difference. Because it was a genuine 50-50 chance.
You have to make a choice.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So that was our last question. Maybe something we can revisit in the future. Let us know if you'd like us to, and let us know in the comments if there are any other questions on admissions life at Cambridge that you would like us to go through in the podcast.
Because we've tried to cover most of the sort of obvious ones in these 3 episodes, but it may well be that there's things that we've forgotten about that it would be just as good to talk about. So any suggestions in the comments, and we can do a part 4 and a part 5 if we need to, until we've answered all the questions.
And the aim is to, on specific topics of admissions, that will give them the attention that they deserve, and a whole podcast on certain parts of the admissions, on certain parts of life at Cambridge, and hopefully on each of the courses as well. So do keep a lookout for that kind of content, and do let us know in the comments what you would like us to talk about on the podcast. But I'm Siam, Outreach Communications Officer at Trinity Hall, and we'll see you guys next time. Nice. I think that's it wasn't as clean, but
I thought it was fine.
I thought it was good.
I thought it was fine.